Okay, let's look at some scenarios and decide what filing status would work best. Okay, so the first one says the taxpayer is married. So right away, I'm feeling like we should do married filing joint or potentially married filing separate, right? You're either married or you're unmarried. And in this case, it says you're married, so I feel like that's going to be the answer. But I'm going to read on. I do have a qualifying child. That's a dependent. And then I read that this person has been living separately from the spouse for the last 8 months. So a lot of really important things there. Living separately, the last and 8 months. So what I've learned is that there is a treatment. It's called the abandoned spouse treatment. And basically, if we have been living separately for the last, it does have to be the last 6 months or more, then we can be considered abandoned spouse, which equals unmarried. So we now get to look at, instead of the married filing whatevers, we get to look at that unmarried options. So we know when we're looking at unmarried, we're looking at single, right? Or in this case, had a household. Now, or qualifying widower. That one's a little bit separate. So we'll look at that one in just a minute. Okay. There we go. Had a household. So those are my two options now. So let's continue reading to see if we can qualify. Remember, we want to qualify for the better of the two. The better of the two is always going to be head of household. And the reason why is the amount of money. So the head of household is going to have a larger standard deduction than single. For example, single might be $13,000 and head of household is going to be $19,000. It's going to be a little bit more. Okay, so let's read on to see if she can qualify for this. She did pay for more than half of the cost of keeping up the household. And she does have a qualifying something. In this case, it's the child. So yeah, we can do this. Now, the spouse does not want to file jointly. Maybe they're going through a divorce. Maybe they're talking about it. Maybe they're just trying to figure it out. Who knows? Sometimes you don't even know where the spouse is. They've literally ran away, right? So in this case, we can have this option, abandoned spouse treatment. It is audited. So if you do decide to elect to go this way, it is something that you would need to have documentation and proof when they come and say, hey, wait, no, we think you should be married separate. You'd have to have that available. Okay, let's look at the next one. So the next one says that the taxpayer's spouse died. So in year, we're going to say year 1. Okay, so the taxpayers were the taxpayer, and in this case, the spouse did pass away right at the end of the year. Right at the end of the year. It doesn't even actually matter when the spouse passed away. We know the year of death. So year of death. For the tax return, it will be married filing. In most cases, joint, okay? But it is going to be married. That's the key there. It could be separate, just depends on what they're doing there. But it is a married tax return. It doesn't matter what day. The date does not matter. So date does not matter. We do not prorate tax returns. So we don't say, oh, okay, 6 months of the year he was alive, the other 6 months they were not. So in this case, she. So the spouse, it looks like was the wife. Okay, so he has no qualifying child. So the second year, that's what we're looking at, is the year after the death. Let's change colors here. So the year after the death, and it could be years because we get 2. As long as we're not remarried, and if we have a qualifying child, we get to be what's called a qualifying widower. So I'm going to write that down. Qualifying widower, or sometimes it's called surviving spouse. Now hang on, we're not going to get it in this case, but I've just got to write it down really quick. So qualifying widow, or it's also called surviving spouse sometimes. Okay, AKA. All right, so only if, so we have to meet the qualifications. So here's the qualifications for this. To qualify, we have to have not gotten married again. So not remarried. And so two things here. And we have to have a qualifying child in order to get the surviving spouse or qualified widower, whatever you want to call it. Okay, so in this case, we don't have that, right? We have no qualifying child. So we can't be qualifying widower. And that, you really couldn't see that very well. So let's cross it off this way. We don't get the qualifying widower or the surviving spouse classification for this. So the years after the death, so in this case, year whatever, in our case, we're calling it year 2, we're going to be single because we don't have these qualifications here. We didn't have a qualifying child. All right, but in year 1, up here, the year of the death, we're considered married.